Hey, I'm Nick.
And I'm Graeme.
And this is the Dude, Where's My Code podcast. This is episode 14. And Graeme, you and I were chatting through a bit of a incident that you guys were able to manage and some learnings from that.
Yeah, it felt like a bit of a therapy session for me, but overall, just, maybe reflecting on and sharing communication techniques, planning and mitigation strategies. Probably the most important summary about not getting so caught up in the plan that you're worried about executing the plan instead of just doing the thing that you set out to do.
Yeah, I thought it was awesome. Some great takeaways. So thanks for watching. We think you're really going to enjoy it, and we'll see you next time.
Oh, it's Monday. I honestly was like, I don't even know what day it is anymore. Last week was somebody discovered a major issue in something we had released like a few weeks ago.
Okay.
And it's hard to explain the nature of how some of our products get used, but like finally someone was like, oh, there's like a major issue with this like thing. We're like, oh, we thought it had gone so well. We were about to run a retro, like praising ourselves for how well the project had went.
Psych.
And then like, no, but the issue was found on Family Day, and no one's working on Family Day. So it was kind of a, hey, whoever, actually, fun fact, the issue wasn't too hard to identify. So I fixed it in a PR.
No way.
So maybe another, and then when the team came online, I was like, hey, there's this PR. Let me justify one, what I did, and two, like why I'm doing this. And I think this is probably a topic for another day, but I really struggled with doing it. Like I didn't do the PR right away. I was kind of like waiting, and then like I was kind of watching the clock, and I was like, oh, like everyone's on the West Coast. People waiting for the fix are not on the West Coast. I'm not on the West Coast. And I was like, okay, I can't fix this by myself just because code review and testing and proper due diligence, but I can certainly speed things up by opening a PR.
Sure.
So anyway, so it was crazy because I haven't done that in a while. But I was really battling with myself as the manager, like just mostly around, I think more than anything, the optics. I was a little worried, like, what does it look like when you think something's gone well? A few weeks later, a major issue is discovered, and a manager like swoops in and like airdrops a PR being like, this is the fix to the big issue. And like, I don't know, there was just something about it that I had to come to terms with, but then I did it and I got a bunch of like thank yous for doing it. So
I think that's something. I'm trying to think through this for the first time, I guess, but I think that's something that you could like certainly provide context to afterwards. Like with the zero context, perhaps someone might be like, hey, like that's weird. Like, why is he doing that? Like, was it so critical? Like, why did no one tell us? Like, I don't know. Maybe people just panic about that up front, but
yeah. So, and something we need to do better as a team anyways is like, this is actually on my agenda for like something to do in the coming weeks, which is really define how we prioritize issues. Like, was this so urgent that we needed to call people in on a holiday? Like, we don't have an on-call rotation right now because we're too small, and that's not really the nature of our business.
You're about to.
Well, I mean, not because of this, but I'm sure we're getting there. But it's like, yeah, it's like, was this important enough to call someone in? It wasn't, so we didn't. But then, like, the next morning, the nature of an asynchronous, like, geographically distributed team is you have people online being like, watching the clock and being like, we know there's this major issue, and the engineers who can fix it are on the West Coast. So, so it's interesting, like, that it fell in a priority area where it's like, I'm not going to call anybody for this, but I am getting increasingly antsy that we haven't fixed it with every like half hour that goes by. So I decided to do something about it.
Right.
Anyway, that was the whole thing that happened on the holiday Monday and then bled into Tuesday. And then that took up our Tuesday. And then that last Tuesday evening, we had this major migration planned. So we actually, something I thought was really cool was we had a meeting kind of early Tuesday afternoon with like just a total, cards on the table, go, no go discussion.
Okay.
Like, it is totally appropriate for us to defer this migration, which is not required to happen immediately, because we had our day a little bit derailed by like a major issue, but
and not derailed because of your PR, right? Your PR was okay.
I mean, it passed.
Built on my machine, right?
Let's say it was just okay. Yeah, no, it was just the distraction caused by, hey, there's a major issue. Hey, like we need to test it, stage it, test it, deploy it.
Especially because some manager went and coded it, and managers don't know anything. So
tried to hack.
Okay, sorry.
If I'm opening a PR, it's probably a hack. So yeah, so that's why I don't know what week it is, because it was just chaotic Tuesday.
A lot of stuff going on, yeah.
Yeah, but we did go ahead with the migration. So, yeah, big deal.
Yeah, so you guys, you mentioned that you were basically set up to have a go or no go planning for your migration. And like, what did that entail then? Like, so obviously it sounds like there's some, and I might be making this up, but it sounds like there's some conditions about whether or not, number one, you can even go ahead with it. That's the go or no go part. But I'm assuming that if you were to go, that there's also contingencies around like this is why we feel it's okay to go.
Yeah, definitely. So we went into Tuesday feeling ready, right? Like, I don't think that we would have had that meeting, because we had kind of had it the week before. Like, let's plan it that was scheduling for Tuesday. Like, we're ready. So this was more of a, let's add this, like, cards on the table conversation, because people have spent the day distracted in solving other problems when they really had probably intended to use Tuesday to prep themselves and get ready for this, big migration. So doing it kind of end of day. It was still within business hours for the West Coast portion of the team, evening for me and anybody else on the East Coast. But yeah, not like it was some, like past teams I've worked with, we've done like midnight work when we know like we have the lowest traffic and everyone's just gotta slog through it. So this was more like, what's our comfort level given all the things that have come out of left field with continuing to go ahead or not. And it was a real, like, full honesty, like we've scheduled this, we've coordinated with a bunch of stakeholders and users that there's this 2-hour maintenance window of downtime. So inconvenient to reschedule, sure, but like a big deal, no. So I want to make that really clear with the team. But, we decided like, no, we're still ready. We're still confident. And so then, obviously when you talk about contingencies, the conversation evolved to, okay, well, we needed these anyway. But then, maybe more so now, if we are any less prepared than we thought we would be, what is some of the, gates that we have to cross, or what are some of the signals that will tell us we're continuing we continue to be able to proceed versus like hitting the abort button and rolling back. So we had already planned for what happens if we need to abort and roll back in the moment, or like kind of as the migration was happening, and then also in the days and even weeks that followed, what would it look like if there was a major issue that we decide is not able to be overcome in a reasonable time frame, and we can just roll back to a known good state and continue on.
Right. So this meeting that you're talking about for the go or no go part was not it sounds like not the first time that these plans were discussed, but it sounds like you were potentially revisiting if they have to be adjusted at all, or you're canceling, basically. We
were trying to be agile, Nick.
Oh, yes. Okay. How do you capitalize that word?
I do laugh because back in early in my career when I worked at BlackBerry, we had these things. Yeah, BlackBerry. I think we were RIM at the time. If anybody wants to go way back, I think these meetings were called software release readiness. I believe they were called SRR meetings because we love our acronyms in corporations.
That's right.
And I remember because I was attending these meetings as a representative of a QA team, and there was like a checklist for every version that we were going to release. and it was like, does this team sign off? Yes, we're ready to release. Does this team sign off? Yes, we're ready to release. Whole list, 10 plus teams weighing in on whether we're ready to release. And there would be I don't even remember their levels, like a director or a VP on the call who kind of makes the final call, even though all they're doing is just hearing everyone on the call say we're good or not. But what's really funny is even if I said we weren't ready, because often we had found issues that we were concerned about, the answer was always we're going anyways, regardless. So
yeah, Graeme, it's just the QA team, so obviously
it was really
you don't
funny
get to say.
to talk about go, no go, but we always go. So I'm laughing. This meeting was not like that. It was, open and transparent. Please bring your issues.
Okay.
And we'll go anyway.
That makes sense. And I guess for context then, after that meeting, people still felt good about the plan because you went ahead with the migration. So despite whatever had happened a little bit more recently, maybe feeling okay, we didn't have as much time to prep as we might have thought originally, people still felt good and plans were set in motion and ready to rock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, all credit to the the team and the tech lead on this one, but we did a lot of prep work to feel ready to make this migration happen. Right, it's a pretty big deal. Literally moving our entire tech stack from being deployed on Heroku to being deployed in a Kubernetes cluster and Google Cloud. So it's everything. It's not even a staged migration, not a slowly diverting traffic from one to their situation. It was just a full lift and shift. So the team had done a bunch of really great work, moving our staging environment weeks or months ahead. QA team, hard work at making sure that all of that was tested to make sure, if it works in staging, functionally we're okay. There's obviously some difficulties with testing configurations, and I don't know, people who have experience testing these things are probably going to tell me you can absolutely do configuration testing and mitigations, and I'm well aware, but real life is the thing too. So
that's exactly it. And the other part to probably layer in is if there's any difference from actual production, then there is at least some opportunity for something else to go wrong. So you can only, it's always just about getting as much confidence as you need to be able to go. So,
right. Yeah. So all due diligence done, feeling as confident as we possibly could, short of being able to just deploy this thing dark and testing it ourselves before diverting traffic, which we couldn't do for reasons I don't need to get into. So, it was a high level of confidence, with a series of contingencies to make sure, if our confidence is ill placed and something goes wrong, we know what to do.
Right. And how did that go?
Yeah. Well, as with all big things, things don't always go according to plan. Okay. Kind of funny. So the migration itself went super smoothly. It was really cool. We employed a bunch of things that I have used with past teams. I want a better word for this. But basically we war roomed it to a degree, which I don't love the term war room, but basically it was a really cool chance to do something that we haven't necessarily done much as a team, which was we're going to open a Zoom channel, right? Everyone's on it. We have a dedicated Slack channel. Yeah. Virtual. We got to do a virtual boardroom.
You said
we put our virtual suits
wrong.
on.
Just kidding.
Slack huddle, anybody? We just sitting virtually together, dedicated Slack channel where we can share links or whatever information we need to. And people are verbally acknowledging okay, we're ready to run this script. Okay, starting the script. Okay, this stage has passed, this stage passed. Really cool, ops being able to just totally teamwork it.
And that feels exciting, doesn't it? When you have a group together, even not physically necessarily, but just a group together, totally aligned on something. Everyone's like, we know we have to keep communicating and, keep the ball rolling. And that feels awesome.
Yeah, it does. It's such a silly thing too. Like, we absolutely could have done this. Just everyone knows their part, and you like post in the team channel, I've run the scripts. Now we wait until like the database is done populating, and then like, okay, now I'm going to start like rerouting DNS and stuff. But like, to be there like face to face was really great. And you'd even see it like, oh, well, like that was unexpected. Okay, well, like, Joe, like, you go take a second and go investigate that. Well, we don't think it's blocking, so we'll go continue on, with the next step, but report back when you find out if that was, a problem, going to be a problem for us or whatever. Like, just stuff like that is, I don't know.
Yeah, it starts
to about communication.
Yeah. I'm just thinking it almost like brings I don't even know the word for it, but like it makes it a little bit more synchronous, real time. Like, instead of just like, if you wouldn't have, the Slack word huddle, I don't know, if you wouldn't have huddled on it or whatever, if you wouldn't have been all together, been zoomed on it, then it would have been kind of back to asynchronous. And it's not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but I'm just thinking through this and thinking about an in-person situation. It kind of brings you closer to that in-person, like, you can see if people are on their camera, you can see the reaction when they're running stuff and they're like, like I ran the thing, but like, and you're like, why is Johnny got a funny look on his face? And Johnny's like, oh, it's because I dropped the customer database and everyone's gone. Like, you kind of get that real time reaction, and it just, I don't know, something about that feels cool.
Yeah. And it totally eliminates any communication lag with when you only have, call it Slack, whatever, right? And you're putting messages out and you don't necessarily get acknowledgement that they've been read, acknowledged, right? Without really, really good, like, nonverbal communication, like, acknowledged, I hear you, like, whatever. Like, unless people are really, really good at that, you get all those extra signals that really feel like the communication lag is like all but eliminated. And I mean, this isn't new. Like, companies I've worked at before, even when we had, open concept offices, sometimes we would like commandeer an office space and like drag our computers in there and drag monitors in there and build like a mini like
LAN party,
and just I was trying to think of some gamer terminology and flags.
Play StarCraft.
That's how bad I am.
That's what people do, right?
Yeah.
So you guys basically did a little huddle on it. It rolled out. You did the migration, and it sounds like aside from little things, the migration itself went okay.
Right. Totally successful. Everything checked out the way we wanted. Everyone packed up and left, in some senses, within their regular business hours, which I don't know how often that happens in a big project like this. It was
never.
I was kind of sharing with the rest of the organization after it had happened, like, these are usually chaotic and long running. And so, just know how big a deal it is that this is going smoothly. Now, Wednesday morning, when traffic really started to ramp up and use it, we did have issues.
Is this one of those like that got to insert and like narrator voice, but things were not as they expected.
Nobody liked that. Yeah.
I need a better narrator voice, but yeah. Imagine that was good.
Go back and play it slower. Deeper.
we can edit that maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, things. I guess things really are never perfect. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah, and so again, I mean, to the team's credit, like, people knew that we needed to watch the next morning, right when actual traffic was starting to use the service. So people who would normally be on later were popping on earlier, saying like, "Hey, I see something's going on. Like, how can I help? Let's figure this out." And I was really reminded about a lesson I learned much earlier in my management career about the real need for managers to be decisive. That's like one of your few real, like, hard responsibilities as a manager, I think, is you don't get to like waffle or fence sit. Like, you're accountable for things to be moving forward.
It's funny because if you take that concept, almost like to a couple extremes. If you have a manager, and maybe you can think, if you're listening or watching, or Graeme, if you can think about a time where you had a manager that maybe was just like, I don't listen to anything, and just like boom, 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 whatever I say is what happens. It's like, that's not a good manager, but they're being decisive. And then you take what people try to do, I think, maybe in like, I probably personally lean into this too much, where it's like, I don't want to do that because that's wrong. So I'll make sure that I try to get information from everyone and everything's good. But then am I being decisive, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, right? I think taking input from as many inputs as you can get, right? Trying to facilitate and guide the team to a decision, like a unanimous decision or a majority decision, is like, it's noble. And I think it, most of the time, it works and is the right thing. But I guess when I say being decisive, it's like, sometimes you've got multiple options on the table, and you can like ask for recommendations, but generally speaking, if there's a bunch of options, like people will say, you know, which one they think is best, but they want to share like that there might be other options and there are risks. And sometimes you get people disagreeing about what the right option is. And at the end of the day, especially in a time crunch when, like, I don't know, your app isn't working for any of your customers, like you have to weigh the information, but weigh the information quickly and then like do something about it. Right. And sometimes just doing something about it, like maybe even like making a decision, it might not be like the optimal one, but just making a decision and acting is actually more important than sitting. I think most of the time. Someone's going to challenge me on that, I'm sure.
Well, but I think the part that was important you mentioned was that if there's options being thrown out, it's not like you just on the spot made up something and said, yeah, we're doing it. But it sounds like you had input. You probably had people weighing pros and cons of stuff. And it was like, okay, if there's options, or even if there's a one option and people are like, but I can't 100% say with confidence, then you can step in and be like, well, like maybe you can't say 100% with confidence either, but you have to basically make the decision and own it, because ultimately the responsibility comes back to you.
Yeah, that's a lesson I learned from somebody years ago, a mutual coworker of ours. But they were often asking, like, okay, well, where's your uncertainty rooted, right? Like, and what do you need to be confident? And we can't always provide it, but just knowing what you need to be confident, especially when the answer is like, I don't know, like, okay, well, like that's also a signal.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Anyway, so all that to say, when you have something going wrong, right? You have like a contingency plan. Like we had a rollback plan. We could always abort and go back, but like that requires like steps, that requires additional inconvenience, that, triggers a whole different workflow. And so deciding whether we're going to roll back or like push forward through the existing challenges and then not fall victim to sunk cost and not get so far in it that we're like, oh gosh, well now we don't want to roll back because we've already hacked 4 or 5 hours into this and a bunch of time and effort or whatever.
Even if it's the right thing to do, we don't want to, because we've already wasted time and resources.
That's always a huge risk. So yeah, in this case, I don't actually think I needed to. I don't think in this case I needed to be overly decisive about anything. I think that the team did a great job kind of debugging what was going on and working through it. And at the end of the day, yeah, it was mostly about kind of the same thing as the day before during the actual migration. It's like, let's like eliminate the lag, right? Let's eliminate any accidental overlap or like rework, and let's just like get on a call. If there's a bunch of threads to pull, let's like pull on them, but let's pull on them together, and then we can kind of like work through the problems. And at any point, if anybody feels like, we are encountering more questions than answers, or like, never really wrapping up any of these threads that we're pulling on and just continuing to pull and just continuing to get more, hopefully somebody would raise their hand and say, this is feeling like we're getting in too deep. Or as a manager, I would be able to identify, listen, like we've been asking a bunch of questions and I'm not seeing a whole lot of answers coming through or a lot of certainty or confidence. So like, let's make that call, right? Let's get out of this panic situation. Let's get out of this pressure situation. Let's go back to a known good state. And then we'll tackle this again. I think that's a lesson that my, former manager, like director and mentor have really instilled in me in software management, which is like, there's some sort of like, there's often like a reticence to just like roll things back. Mm-hmm. And really one of the best things you can do is just get yourself back into a known good state, right? Things are unblocked. Customers aren't blocked or encountering problems. And I'm like, great, let's try again. You can come at the problem a lot more level-headed that way.
Right. Yeah.
So I think being able to make that call is important. But it's funny talking about that since we didn't end up having to.
Right. Yeah. Well, I was thinking about that as you were saying it. So I like fully agree that based on like all of my experience, and when I say my experience, I don't necessarily mean just from things I was actively involved in, but also like from observing things around me. It almost always is like, so something breaks wherever it is, and it seems like the typical like the engineer wants to be like, oh, let me just go put the fix in, like I will, forward fix, and then everyone else is like, no, roll back, like what are you doing? And it's really funny that like you must roll back as being the de facto, like it's just the right thing to do. I would say like probably more often than not it is, but it's like, it's interesting. It's not
have
black
you,
and white.
I mean, I know the answer to this question, but like, have you been, in a situation where there's an issue and you're like, I can just see the commit messages in my head, like quick fix. And then like, oh, oops, like missed this, right? And then you get like this and this and this. And then suddenly it's like, man, we're in this pretty bad and it's not working yet. Let's just revert. And then you look at the like Git tree and you're like, oh shit, like how do I even back all of this mess out? How do I get
And
back
that's
to that
why we
state?
don't use merge commits, people. I'm just kidding. Do whatever you want, but you're wrong if you use merge
Let's not
commits.
go down that road. Right. Like, and so it's just, it's funny because there are probably times when the quick fix works or like the forward fix works. But is it worth it given how many times it doesn't work? And yeah, just get out of there.
But in this particular situation, for when you're talking about the migration, the first part went well, traffic hits, things maybe not going so well. It sounds like you were in a position at least where instead of just jumping right, because you guys had planned for it, right? Instead of jumping right to, just press the button to roll it all back instantly, you took the time to actually look at what was going on and make a decision about what you thought would be more appropriate.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things that enabled that, and that's why it's, as with all things, comes down to context. I'm glad you highlighted that because it's a good point. And so for us, right, there's a couple of pieces to this. One, our mobile app is designed to work offline. So the majority of our users use the mobile app, and then we have a web app component. The web app component was misbehaving, but people were not blocked from using the mobile app. Potentially from some of the sync flows, right? So like partially blocked, but people could still do their core jobs, which really gave us a lot of space. It's not like, oh my God, everything's down and no one can do anything, and this is like a true incident. So there's that helped. I think the other piece is like, well, often I do actually believe if you have a rollback button, it's the right thing to do, to maybe be overly pressy with it and like just do the rollback.
Pressy.
That's
yeah. Like that.
2 years of Blake, my former boss, telling me that, like, just roll back. What are you doing? Don't be an idiot. Roll back. I will say, if we had that option, I think I probably would have been more inclined to go for that. The additional piece of context here is a rollback after some users had used the software would really require, like, making the DNS changes, not a big deal, but figuring out the delta between what data had been added to the new version of the database and get that back migrated to the previous platform. So there's like some complexity to it.
So there is no button. Like, that's the reality.
I think that's the thing, is like, was rollback difficult. No, but there was enough of a barrier there that we couldn't just like default to it and be like, yeah, no, whatever, it's fine, just roll back.
Like close your eyes, press the button, because it's known, tried, tested. You know that when you press the rollback button, figuratively, that it just will put you back to that good state. You have a plan to get there, but it's not like a proven way that's always going to work with a single click kind of thing.
Yeah, so I guess that helped balance like us not doing anything to the extreme either way. But we did. I mean, you know, I spoke with you about this before, but knowing that balance and then not suddenly realizing, oh, like crap, we've been battling with this for 2 days, and like we should have just done the thing, right? There has to be that threshold of, what are we willing to tolerate before we just back out of this and reassess?
Yeah, and I think I wanted to kind of maybe bring it back to this. So we talked about, or you elaborated on like the fact that you guys had done planning, followed up by a go or no go. So like planning was involved in this. It wasn't just something that was like, hey, we're doing it and we're going to hack it out for a night. Happened to look good, next day not so good. No, there was planning involved. You guys invested time, effort. And I'm curious, like in the end, because things are all good, in the end, if you didn't necessarily act on, you kind of talked about like 2 mitigation plans, right? Like a borderline immediate and then like a longer term one. So if you planned all this stuff out and didn't end up using either of those, I have opinions about this. I'm just going to ask you, what was the point of planning?
Yeah. What a waste of time that was.
Was it? Like, that's like, you know, I have an opinion. I'm curious to.
I mean, what's your opinion before I?
No, that's not how this works.
Oh,
I can share.
I didn't know whether this was an interrogation.
A little bit, yeah.
You're welcome to opine. We're in the nest. It's safe.
I don't even know what that word means.
Opine? It's a song about a Christmas tree.
Oh, I think I might know that one then. Hey, no, okay. I'm happy to share my perspective on it. I think I ask it so bluntly because, like, I think there is a ton of value in doing some of the planning. Like, again, I don't know the details of, did you guys plan this for, 2 years straight? And like, I might go, hey, maybe that was a little overkill, but putting in some thought, some planning ahead of time to come up with some strategies, I think is super valuable because it's alignment. It's thinking through different things that people on their own wouldn't come up with. It's coming up with some plans, but what I would feel pretty good making an argument about this, but most of the time, the plans that you put together are just not the things that you do in practice. And it's because there's, like, in software and probably other industries and stuff, there's uncertainties you can't account for. So the plan that you come up with is not the thing you do, but all of the effort that went into planning helped you make decisions in real time or with a little bit of extra, huddling and effort to align and do the right things to kind of get you back on track.
There's a quote about this, and if I try to get it right, I'll butcher it. So instead, I'll just paraphrase it for myself. But it's just that, like, the plan is the plan. The plan isn't the goal, right? And following the plan isn't the goal. The goal is to get to the thing. And so it's like, it's too easy to get lost in, like, well, we made a plan. We have to follow it. Like, yeah. Damn it, Leroy. It's just, like you said, it's having a plan means we have thought through some of the hows about what we're doing. We've probably talked about the why and put a bunch of context around it that helps the team get aligned and be able to execute in this time and make decisions with more information and maybe in ways that wouldn't be surprising to each other. So, like, I don't know. I think that it's, oh God, I hate military analogies, but there's so many of them. But when the military does strategizing, battle planning, whatever, for the longest time. Like they all do this, which is like there is a statement of what they're trying to accomplish. It doesn't matter how much you plan, like, and how many contingencies you plan for. Like, things might go to hell. We're on Earth in real life, and so as long as everybody who's involved knows what we're trying to accomplish, and a lot of the kind of variables that we've discussed and the things that we prioritize and the things that we don't, they can make good decisions that will drive us to that end state, that desired end goal. So planning, even if we don't follow any of the plans or things come out of so far left field that we couldn't have anticipated or planned for them, still do a great job level setting the team. And kind of being that information that helps clarify that North Star, I guess.
Yeah. And even though you said you didn't have the quote exactly, I still like how you put it. It made sense, right? It's like, the goal is not to follow the plan to a T. The goal is to get to the goal.
Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting. And I guess I'm curious maybe to try thinking about some summaries here. I have a couple of things that came to mind for takeaways that, like for me personally, this isn't like totally top of mind. Like, it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm about to go do a migration and good thing I was planning and maybe I'll bring this back to the team. But I think there's a couple things that came to mind for me that I want to keep top of mind if we have something coming up that maybe isn't a migration, maybe it is, but something where, we have to maybe plan for some situation that might have uncertainty around it. So I was curious. I didn't like give you time to like rehearse this and think about it, but it might be top of mind for you because this is all fresh. But are there a couple of things where going through this, you were like, next time, like this worked really well or this didn't, and like you're gonna repeat it or act differently the next time you go into this?
Gosh, I think most of the things went well enough that, as with all big projects, we're going to do a retro. We haven't yet, so I can't spoil it because it hasn't happened. But I think, we will take away kind of the goods and the bads and try and redo all the things that went well. I will say the amount of diligence that went to building that upfront confidence was really helpful and important. I think the documenting and clarifying of kind of some of the contingencies, really important, right? It wasn't just like talked about, it was like step by step, like listed and rehearsed with the team.
Even though you did not end up following those, right, to a T, it was still, you're saying like that was a useful thing to go do. Definitely.
So I think we would certainly do that again. In terms of, misses or things we might want to iterate on. I mean, at the end of the day, it's almost embarrassing to say that the issue came down to some silly misjudgments that we made that we actually had data for, that we could have actually had the answers earlier.
You weren't going to say some silly PR that some manager checked in right before a migration.
Someone just totally, can you imagine like the thing that I did, like, oh man,
that would have been the most epic like plot twist. But yeah, okay,
that would be the story of the last time Graeme ever wrote code. But that's not I hope the case.
Today is not that day.
No, live to code again. It's just about how there was more certainty to be had, and I want to dig into how we could have gotten that information, which would have maybe changed slightly the way we approach this, very technically, like at the implementation level. But I think it's always interesting to me when we get more information after or mid project or after release or whatever, and we get more information that we totally had accessible to us before. And like, why didn't we recognize that? Like those are always, that's just so interesting to me. And my favorite part about retros is like, all right, we're never going to do the thing we just did again, but I want to know next time we do something similar, how we don't miss this kind of category of information that was available to us.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, those are good. I think I have like probably like very general takeaways, but they still, I mean, they stood out to me, and I want to make sure I don't like forget them, I guess. So one was around, because like things around communication seem to be pretty top of mind for me. Remote teams, I have people in different geographies, like across the world. And I think that, I think that I've seen even like handling live site issues is never fun for anyone, but I've seen situations where there's been people, up late at night across different geos, and like basically people are huddling and they're working together. And it's like, I want to, the part that you were speaking about that kind of stood out to me was like, not necessarily that people have to like stay up and work extra or whatever. But you do. It was more about the idea that you can change the style of communication slightly to get some other effects out of it. So instead of defaulting to like, yeah, we got email. Yeah, we have our own, we use Teams. Yeah, we have our own Teams chats, and like we could just go do this. It's like being more purposeful and saying like, no, like we're going to rally. We're going to get into this, this, and it maybe doesn't even have to be a call. Like people, you could get on the call, but basically having it purposeful to like just get people together and try to remove as much like asynchronous communication as possible if the situation warrants it. So I thought that was kind of interesting as just this idea of being more purposeful about how you plan to communicate. And the other part that you said that I really like, and it's almost like it seems obvious, but I don't think that it's said enough. It just goes back to like the plan. The goal is not to follow the plan to a T. Like it sounds so funny to say that out loud because it's like, yeah, no shit. But the reality is like planning has a use. It's going to help people get aligned. And if people are aligned when things are not as planned, then at least you can all work together to solve the problem. So I want to lean into that a little bit more. I don't have a situation that comes to mind like coming up where I'm like, oh, that'll be perfect, but I'm hoping it like stays up here and I can tap into it.
It'll just happen. It'll just catch you one day.
Yeah.
There is another quote that I do know better, which is just that like, they say no plan survives first contact with reality. And I just think that's so important to keep in mind too. Just like,
that's a pretty succinct way of saying it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but it doesn't capture the whole, like, don't be hyper focused on like making the plan be the thing. Cause it's like, it's not the thing. I think that's important too, but under the surface, what you have to remember is just if your plan doesn't cover all the bases, like that's because they never do. Like that's not a miss for you.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, maybe you could take a certain element into account next time, or maybe that will inform a stronger plan next, like in a similar situation. But at the end of the day, planning to have the perfect plan, I think, is a waste of your time.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, so I'm glad that ended up going well for you in the end. It would be cool to hear, I want to hear from you after like how the retro goes, and if people basically had similar ideas, if different things came out of this. But yeah, I thought, no, this is a good chat. I really think that it's cool to be able to reflect on some of this stuff, especially because I didn't have to go through an incident. So that's nice. Yeah, lots of good learning. So thanks, cool. Graeme. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave comments. And actually, it'd be really cool if you have ideas about what you'd like us to talk about. We'd be happy to explore that. We're always looking for interesting topics. So if they're relevant to you, that would be cool for us to chat through.
And they're probably relevant to somebody else.
Yeah, guaranteed, right? So awesome. Thanks and take care.